Back in the 1980s, school cafeteria food felt completely normal at the time. But looking back now, some of those lunches seem almost impossible to believe. Noisy lunch lines, plastic trays, mystery meat, tiny milk cartons, soggy fries, and desserts loaded with enough sugar to turn an entire classroom upside down after lunch. The cafeteria always smelled like pizza, chocolate milk, French fries, bleach, and overcooked vegetables all mixed together beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. And somehow, almost nobody questioned any of it. So today, we're counting down 10 unforgettable school cafeteria foods from the 1980s that probably wouldn't survive modern lunch standards, including one legendary favorite near the end that Gen X kids still remember decades later.
Number 10. Rainbow Sprinkle Sheet Cake. Every Gen X kid remembers those giant cafeteria sheet cakes, covered with thick frosting and rainbow sprinkles that practically glowed under the cafeteria lights. The second lunch ladies rolled those metal dessert carts into the cafeteria, kids instantly started paying attention. For a lot of students, dessert was the best part of the entire school day. Back in the 1980s, cafeteria cakes were loaded with sugar, food coloring, shortening, and frosting so sweet it almost made your teeth hurt after the first bite. The cake itself was soft, slightly warm, and cut into giant squares that barely fit onto those plastic trays beside mystery meat and chocolate milk cartons. Some versions had bright neon pink frosting, while others were covered in thick vanilla icing packed with crunchy rainbow sprinkles that somehow ended up all over the cafeteria tables and floors by the end of lunch. And every Gen X kid remembers classrooms getting louder after lunch on cake day, while exhausted teachers trying calming down 30 sugar-loaded kids at once. Today, schools worry about sugar, artificial dyes, and processed desserts. But back then, nobody cared how much frosting kids inhaled at lunch, as long as the cafeteria lines kept moving and students stayed happy. And somehow, the next cafeteria breakfast item contained even more sugar. Number 9. Cafeteria cinnamon rolls bigger than your head. Back in the 1980s, cafeteria cinnamon rolls weren't just breakfast food, they were enormous. Gen X kids still remember walking into school early in the morning and smelling warm cinnamon, melted icing, and sugar drifting through the hallways before first period even started. And honestly, those cinnamon rolls alone could make school feel worth showing up for. Some were so oversized, they practically covered the entire paper plate by themselves. Thick spirals dripping with icing, while kids pulled them apart piece by piece before class even started. And somehow, schools served them alongside chocolate milk, greasy sausage, or powdered eggs, like that was a perfectly normal breakfast for children. Nobody questioned it. The icing got everywhere, too, onto fingers, napkins, homework folders, sometimes even onto desks if somebody tried eating too fast before the morning bell rang. Today, school breakfasts are far more controlled, with calorie limits, ingredient rules, and nutrition standards. But back then, giant cinnamon rolls loaded with sugar and frosting were treated like a completely normal way for kids to start the day. And for a lot of Gen X students, those cafeteria cinnamon rolls are still one of the strongest food memories from childhood.
Number 8. Powdered eggs at breakfast. Every Gen X kid remembers cafeteria eggs that barely looked like real eggs at all. They usually arrived in giant metal trays as soft yellow piles that somehow managed to look watery and rubbery at the exact same time. And honestly, most kids recognized the smell before they even reached the cafeteria line. Back in the 1980s, many schools used powdered egg mixes because they were cheap, easy to prepare, and fast enough to feed hundreds of students before class started. But the texture, that's what everybody still remembers. Sometimes the eggs looked dry around the edges, but weirdly wet in the middle, and almost every kid drowned them in ketchup, hoping it would somehow improve the situation. They were usually served beside burnt toast, greasy potatoes, or tiny milk cartons sweating on cold plastic trays beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Today, schools follow much stricter standards involving freshness, preservatives, and processed ingredients. But during the 1980s, cafeterias focused more on feeding huge numbers of hungry kids quickly and cheaply than making breakfast actually taste homemade. And honestly, once lunch started later in the day, the food somehow looked even stranger than the eggs.
Number 7. Chicken nuggets with neon cheese sauce. Back in the 1980s, school cafeterias somehow made chicken nuggets look both delicious and slightly dangerous at the exact same time. Gen X kids still remember those rectangular nuggets sitting beneath cafeteria heat lamps, beside giant tubs of glowing yellow cheese sauce that barely looked like real cheese at all. And somehow, most kids absolutely loved it. The nuggets were crispy on the outside, mystery meat on the inside, and dumped onto divided plastic trays beside fries or tater tots. But for a lot of students, the real attraction wasn't even the nuggets, it was the cheese sauce. That thick neon orange liquid got poured over everything: nuggets, fries, tater tots, and sometimes practically the entire tray itself. Nobody questioned why the cheese glowed brighter than the fluorescent lights overhead. Every cafeteria table had at least one kid trying to scoop up extra cheese with a French fry, while somebody else accidentally spilled an entire cup across their lunch tray. Today, schools worry about sodium, preservatives, artificial coloring, and heavily processed foods. But during the 1980s, cafeterias cared way more about serving cheap comfort food kids would actually eat. And honestly, those greasy nuggets and radioactive-looking cheese cups are permanently burned into Gen X memory. But somehow, lunch trays became even messier once Taco Day arrived. Number 6. Beef taco boats. Every Gen X kid remembers cafeteria taco boats falling apart before you even finished the first bite. Back in the 1980s, Taco Day felt exciting because students were desperate for anything different from the usual cafeteria food. But eating them? That was complete chaos. Lunch ladies stuffed greasy ground beef into crunchy shell boats, while shredded lettuce and melted cheese immediately exploded all over the tray the second you picked one up. And honestly, half the taco usually ended up on the cafeteria table anyway. The shells were stale around the edges, overloaded with greasy meat filling, and almost impossible to eat neatly inside loud cafeterias packed with shouting kids and slamming lunch trays. Some schools added watery salsa, while others dumped thick orange cheese sauce directly over the top until the shell turned soggy within minutes. And somehow, Taco Day still pulled huge cafeteria lines, because even messy cafeteria tacos felt exciting compared to mystery meat all over again. Today, schools focus much more on fresh ingredients and balanced meals. But during the 1980s, taco boats were mostly about feeding hundreds of hungry students quickly and cheaply. And somehow, the next cafeteria food looked even less appetizing.
And before we get to the final cafeteria foods, if these lunches are bringing back memories from your old school days, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more forgotten Gen X memories every week. And honestly, I'd love to hear your cafeteria memories too. What was the weirdest, best, or most unforgettable school lunch your school ever served? Maybe it was square pizza, mystery meat, sloppy joes, or some bizarre cafeteria creation that kids today would never believe actually existed. Drop your memories down in the comments, because in an upcoming video, I'll be reading some of my favorite stories and giving shoutouts to subscribers who share them. Now let's get back to the countdown.
Number 5. Overcooked macaroni and cheese. Back in the 1980s, cafeteria macaroni and cheese rarely looked creamy or homemade. Most of the time, it arrived in giant metal trays looking like thick yellow blocks that had been sitting beneath heat lamps since early morning. And honestly, kids either loved it or completely avoided it. Every Gen X kid remembers scooping rubbery macaroni onto those plastic trays while steam poured out from the middle like lava. The top layer was always dry and crusty, but underneath somehow stayed weirdly gooey at the same time. And if you waited too long to eat it, the cheese practically turned into glue. Some cafeteria versions got so overcooked, students could almost lift entire squares onto the tray in one solid piece without it falling apart. So kids dumped salt, pepper, or ketchup all over it, trying to make it taste better, while cafeteria workers kept rolling out tray after tray to endless lunch lines. Today, schools worry more about processed cheese, preservatives, and sodium levels. But during the 1980s, cafeteria macaroni and cheese was considered cheap comfort food that filled kids up fast. And somehow, dessert after lunch could get even stranger than the main meal itself.
Number 4. Pudding cups with skin on top. Every Gen X kid remembers those little cafeteria pudding cups with that weird skin layer sitting on top. Back in the 1980s, pudding showed up constantly on school lunch trays. Chocolate, vanilla, sometimes butterscotch if your cafeteria was feeling unusually adventurous. And kids usually had very strong opinions about pudding day. The pudding itself was thick, cold, overly sweet, and packed into those tiny plastic cups that made that weird popping sound when you peeled back the lid. But the real problem was always the top layer. If the pudding sat too long in the cafeteria cooler, that thin, rubbery skin formed across the surface, and every kid noticed it immediately. Some students stirred it back in, pretending not to care. Others carefully peeled the entire thing off with a spoon, like they were removing plastic wrap from the top. And somehow, every lunch table had the exact same argument. Are you going to eat that part? Today, schools focus much more on freshness, healthier desserts, and food presentation. But during the 1980s, cafeteria pudding cups with weird skin on top were treated like a completely normal part of lunch. And honestly, the next cafeteria food somehow looked even stranger. Number 3. Square cheese pizza with burnt edges. Every Gen X kid remembers cafeteria pizza coming in perfect little squares instead of slices. Back in the 1980s, Pizza Day instantly became the best lunch day of the week. The second students smelled melted cheese drifting through the cafeteria hallway, everybody suddenly started moving faster through the lunch line. And honestly, most kids would have eaten that pizza no matter what it looked like. The crust was thick and chewy, the sauce somehow tasted weirdly sweet, and the corners were almost always burnt dark brown from sitting too long inside giant cafeteria ovens. But somehow, those crispy burnt edges became part of the experience. Gen X kids still remember greasy cardboard trays, cheese sliding halfway off the crust, and at least one kid folding the square slice in half while trying not to spill chocolate milk across the cafeteria table. Some students peeled the cheese off first, while others traded burnt crust pieces with friends like they were valuable currency. Today, schools worry about sodium, grease, preservatives, and processed cheese. But during the 1980s, square cafeteria pizza honestly felt like one of the greatest lunches schools could possibly serve. And somehow, the next cafeteria meal still confuses people who didn't grow up during that era.
Number 2. Chili with cinnamon rolls. Back in the 1980s, some school cafeterias served one of the strangest lunch combinations ever created: chili with cinnamon rolls. And somehow, millions of kids treated it like a perfectly normal meal. Gen X students from certain parts of America still remember opening their cafeteria trays and seeing a steaming bowl of thick chili sitting beside a giant frosted cinnamon roll dripping with icing. Kids usually reacted one of two ways. They either absolutely loved it or thought it looked completely insane. Some students dipped pieces of cinnamon roll directly into the chili, while classmates stared across the table in horror. Others refused to let the foods touch at all. And somehow, every cafeteria had giant debates over which method was correct. The smell alone was unforgettable too.
sweet frosting mixing with salty chili, while lunch trays slammed across tables beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Today, schools focus more on balanced meals and nutrition standards. But during the 1980s, cafeterias served strange regional comfort foods simply because generations of students had grown up eating them that way. And honestly, the final cafeteria food on this list became one of the most unforgettable school lunch memories of the entire decade. Number 1. Corn dogs served on plastic trays. Every Gen X kid remembers cafeteria corn dogs sitting on those divided plastic lunch trays, beside fries, canned fruit, or tiny chocolate milk cartons sweating beneath the cafeteria lights. For a lot of kids, Corn Dog Day felt like one of the best lunches of the entire month. Back in the 1980s, school cafeterias served giant batches of frozen corn dogs that were deep-fried, shoved under heat lamps, and handed out as fast as students shuffled through the lunch line. The outside coating was greasy, slightly soggy near the stick, and somehow always way too hot in the middle. And every Gen X kid remembers taking that first bite too fast and instantly burning the roof of their mouth while pretending nothing happened. Meanwhile, somebody nearby covered theirs in ketchup, somebody else drowned theirs in mustard, and at least one kid always tried trading half their lunch just to get an extra corn dog from a friend. And somehow, those things tasted even better after PE class. Today, schools worry about processed meat, preservatives, frying oils, sodium levels, and frozen foods loaded with artificial ingredients. But during the 1980s, corn dogs were considered perfect cafeteria food because kids actually wanted to eat them. And looking back now, it's honestly hard to believe an entire generation grew up thinking greasy corn dogs, square pizza, neon cheese sauce, giant cinnamon rolls, and pudding cups with weird skin on top were simply a normal part of everyday school life.